Episode of Cello Chat is brought to you by Carriage House Violins of Johnson String Instrument. Please visit us at www.carriagehouseviolins.com.
All right, and we're live.
Oh, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Rund. I'm Executive Director of Cello Bello. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
And I don't normally come on these chats, but today is a little bit of a different chat. I mean, Mike has been a friend to Cello Bello and a luminary in the field for quite a long time. And we've interacted in a variety of ways. And so there could be any number of reasons we could have him as a Cello Chat host, but today's Cello Chat sort of ties into an organizational goal of Cello Bellows through the past few years, is that we, in 2021, started to identify all of the values that are imbued on the organization that sort of drive our decision making about what we do and why we do it. And we decided to go ahead and articulate those values in writing and be able to share those with people who are using the site. So Jeremy, maybe you could put the link in the chat of cellobello.org/about. And we'd be happy to share those values with you. But one of the values really starts off with a powerful belief on our part that artists are incredible agents for positive societal change. And Mike is the perfect example of that. And today's chat in particular, Play for the Vote, is an initiative that I'm going to ask Mike to give a little bit of history on before he goes too much further, but is really an exciting thing that I think empowers artists to actually take action on the values so many of us share. So I'm happy to introduce Mike and so grateful for his time. And I hope that it inspires many of you out there listening to actually take action and create a better place. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks, Robert, for inviting me to share this with everybody. Hello, cellists of the universe. It's great to be back here in Cello Chat with Cello Bello. So this whole organization that Robert wanted me to get to talk to you about is called Play for the Vote. And our mission and activities are pretty simple. We organize musical performances at polling locations on Election Day in America. And our simple goal is to make voting a more positive community building experience. And we think that music has the unique power to bring people together. And so, there's a lot of stress right now and kind of, leading up through election time in America. And we believe that it doesn't matter who you're voting for, but everybody is actually showing up to a polling location with the shared purpose of thinking about the future of our democracy and having our voices heard. And so we want people to really feel the shared sense of purpose that voting really is about. And I particularly love how hyper local our voting precincts are. So you're going to run into neighbors and people in the next building, the next house at your polling location. And for musicians, we can help make that a community experience, a neighborhood experience, rather than sort of a divisive, nationally minded experience. And so that's the mission of Play for the Vote, is to make voting more positive and a more of a connecting experience. And in so doing, encourage more people to go out and vote. So we want to amplify voter turnout with the power of music, which means that I get to talk to a bunch of musicians like this moment right here and encourage all of you to sign up. You can perform and sign up to perform on Election Day right now at Play for the Vote's website, playforthevote.org. And when you go to playforthevote.org, you can choose your polling location. It can be yours where you would vote, or you can choose another location in your area that you think there might be a great need for music at. So you choose your location and you choose your time, and you tell us when you want to perform. And we've got some indications as to when peak voting times are and when the best use of your energy might be. And then after you sign up, not only do we have a system for checking for conflicts to make sure that other people aren't showing up at the same time in the same place. But we also have a whole resource pack that we're going to be sharing with all of the musicians, just to give you tips on the ground of how to do it successfully, but also how to do it legally. There's actually all these rules as to what you can do at a polling location. And so, we have to maintain a really strict nonpartisan identity in order to be at the polling location playing music. And so we have all sorts of tips for the performers that we assist them with after you've signed up to perform. And we can even help give you signage that say "play for the vote." And there's some like apparel you can even purchase just to help it feel all the more official. And I think that really helps the experience. So that's the idea of Play for the Vote. We started in 2020. Actually, the idea for Play for the Vote happened in this very office, my practice room at home. And it was really like the last month before the 2020 election. I was practicing in here while thinking about the presidential debate that I had watched the night before, and it was so stressful. And all of the rhetoric was so heated. And I simply observed as I was practicing, I observed in myself that I was feeling better. I was starting to relax a little bit after playing cello. And this was, peak pandemic time, fall 2020. So I didn't have much going on. And I just thought to myself, oh, maybe I'll go, if music is making me feel better, maybe I'll go to my polling location and play for my neighbors on election day, and it'll help them feel better. And then 5 minutes later, I thought, well, what if everybody I know went to a polling location to play music? And so that's how Play for the Vote started. Since 2020, well, I should say actually 2020 was such a compressed planning thing, moment, because the idea only occurred to me a month before the election. So it took me a week to like get a website together and get some people to help me and consult. And so we only announced that we existed 3 weeks before the election. And in those 3 weeks, we got 1,500 musicians to perform at polling locations across the country in 48 states. And so it became clear after our like post-election survey to the musicians that people wanted to do this again. So since 2020, we formed an official 501c3 nonprofit organization, a process I hope to never go through again. It was not my most fun use of energy to kind of manage that, but I have an incredible board of people that are helping me now, and we're able to raise money so that we've hired an administrator who's helping us get the word out. We've hired a PR firm who's helping us get the word out. And we've really kind of got some infrastructure now to make a bigger impact for this year's election on November 5th. And our goal is to have 5,000 musicians performing on Election Day this year. And I think apart from Election Day itself, we've had people performing at early voting days. And then even we've done some fundraising events. And what we've really appreciated is even ahead of the election, when musicians are planning to perform and they're able to promote their election day polling location performance as if it was a real gig, suddenly we've got a lot of positive energy being sent into the political conversation around election time. So even for one musician playing at one location, even if they're not able to play for 10,000 people themselves, like helping get the word out online and making people think differently about what they might be able to expect. Maybe there will be music at your polling location, and kind of injecting some positivity into the election experience, the voting experience is all part of our goal. In addition to the day of November 5th itself. So that's a little bit about the history of Play for the Vote and sort of how we started and what our goals are. But again, I know there's a lot of cellists that might be listening to this. This, cello community is my musical community of origin. And so we predictably had tons of cellists. Dare I say, overrepresentation of cellists performing in 2020 for Play for the Vote. And I would love if any and all of you can make it out on November 5th this year. You can enroll right now at playforthevote.org. And again, I'm seeing the enrollments come in. We've got musicians from the Metropolitan Opera who have signed up. We've got a high school choir in Minnesota who's signed up. We've got bluegrass musicians, classical musicians, jazz musicians. We've got Suzuki schools who are going to send a whole parade of kids out to play for the vote. And so it's really any style of music, any instrument, any age, and for better or worse, any level of musician is welcome to participate. So I'm just here to encourage everybody to check it out at playforthevote.org. And hopefully you can tell your friends and put together an ensemble and be a part of this experience as well.
Thank you so much, Mike, for the overview of Play for the Vote. I was wondering, what was your personal experience like actually playing for people at these polling locations? What were the reactions of people that were there to listen?
What my favorite part? Well, I had two favorite parts. When you're playing outside as people are approaching a polling location, I remember getting to kind of stand in the middle of like a curved line, and I was kind of right at the curve. So I was kind of getting people from when they entered the line until almost when they went into the building. And I was kind of up on a little grassy hill, so I could see people approaching, and I could see the faces light up as they were crossing the street. Like, oh my gosh, there's music. And like that feeling of like, surprised joy just made it feel all the more exciting, so it felt like it was just such a pleasant surprise for people to encounter. And then the other thing that I noticed, and we got feedback from other performers about this as well, we had many performers who managed to play inside a polling location. And the line comes and goes, and the voters, after they vote, they leave, right? And so if you stay and perform for an hour or two or three, the people that end up getting to benefit the most from your music are actually the poll workers, because they're actually the ones that are there the whole day. And so that was kind of something that we didn't realize ahead of time. But as much as we're playing for the voters, we're also playing for the poll workers and helping to brighten their day. And that also felt like just an integral and meaningful part of the experience as well.
Thank you. Do you have any tips for playing outside, or any difficulties that you had to overcome?
Yes, it was cold in 2020. And so, I would encourage fingerless gloves for the cellists out there. And then also just, dressing warmly. Some people in some locations are totally able to get inside the building by befriending some of the poll workers. I chose to play outside so I could catch people as they were approaching. And without it being too shameless of a plug, I would highly recommend the Forte 3D carbon fiber 3D printed cello to withstand the elements. Because you may or may not feel comfortable bringing an expensive wooden instrument out in the cold. But of course, that's different depending on where you live as far as what the weather might be. But I think the whole idea, of kind of like engaging with the public, if anybody's had busking experience, it changes the equation in for Play for the Vote, because we're not asking for money. So really, it's all about giving the energy to the people that you're encountering, and essentially not needing to ask for anything in return. So it's kind of a fun mindset to be able to sit in for a couple of hours, where you're not even like hoping people tip, or kind of like waiting to see. It's inherently non-transactional, and all of our performers are volunteering. So it's kind of a really fun experience in that way too.
Do you have any tips for people that have never really busked or played in public outside like this before? Any because for a lot of people it might be scary to play out in public.
Sure. Well, if you are a cellist who needs a chair, then you should bring your own chair. I obviously play standing up with the block strap. So logistically, if you're going to need an end pin stopper and a chair, just to be self-sufficient is the key. To bring whatever you need and not expect to find it at the location. That being said, like, acoustically, like if you had a choice to play with a wall behind you or out in a field, I would recommend playing like up against a building so that there's a wall that can help acoustically help you just feel more heard. Um, but I mean, essentially, I would encourage people not to be afraid of busking, of playing outside on the street, or even engaging with people to get into the building, because nobody's ever complained about seeing a cello by surprise playing music. So I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how like engaged and interested people are, if you're out there offering the music.
In a similar vein, do you have any tips for younger people that might be first-time voters that have never really gone through the process of registering to vote and all the logistics that it takes to actually get to the polling place?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know specifically in which locations, the deadline to register might be approaching or already have happened. But for people that are registered, I think what strikes me about the in-person voting experience is how easy it is. Where I vote, I don't have to show any ID. I just kind of go in and say my name and my address, because the precinct is very hyper localized to where you live. And so then it's just, I just say where I live and what my name is, and then they give me the piece of paper and I go do it. And luckily at my polling location, lines have not been an issue for me. So it's essentially, it always goes a little quicker than I anticipate. Um, but I think, again, what's cool, one time I had a neighbor who lived 2 doors down from me working at the polling location. And so it was that I remember that experience of seeing somebody I knew, working there was exciting. And so you don't know if you'll run into neighbors or other people in that experience. So essentially, it's easier than you think it's going to be, and everybody is nicer than you might expect, because it's not like a store or a DMV or anything. Everybody's there. All the people working, I think, are volunteers largely. So I always feel like there's a good energy there. It's not like people are at their 9 to 5 job wanting it to get over with. Everybody's really excited about the election process.
Great. I was wondering if you feel like as classical musicians or as musicians, are there any bills or projects that are going on in government that more people should be aware of?
Oh, well, now I wish I knew more about government, activities with the arts. I don't know of any particularly that, are things that people should be aware of and getting involved in. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell musicians that are interested in signing up for Play for the Vote?
Well, I do know that it's more fun in groups, although obviously cello being the best instrument in the world, you could just go out there and play Bach all day long and everybody's going to be happy. But it can be fun to put together a duo, or there's a lot of string quartets that get out there to play. And then that just makes the whole experience all the more social and meaningful for you, where, if for some reason there's, not a line of voters standing in front of you, you still have people to play with. So that's really up to personal preference if people want to play by themselves or bring people into it with them. Um, but again, I think part of our vision is that this becomes like a performance that you can tell the world about. And so when people sign up, we're giving you resources to promote it like a gig and get connected to the movement. We just released a video on socials of Yo-Yo Ma talking about Play for the Vote. And so our goals of sort of elevating the brand of Play for the Vote make it a meaningful thing for people to associate with and to tell their fans and friends about. And so there's even in the promotion ahead of election day, and then of course at election day, this is an opportunity for you as a musician to kind of ring the bells of what matters to you about this moment, about elections and about voting, and even about the use of music. I mean, this is going back for me, through contact with Yo-Yo through Silk Road Ensemble, and seeing how he's, in real time, really thinking about how he can use his music and engage with the world around him. And I know when Yo-Yo talks about this idea of the citizen musician, that he's connecting it to the things that he saw and heard Pablo Casals talking about. And of course, Rostropovich has a history of doing things in a politically minded way with the cello as well. And, going back to Casals's quote of like, we are citizens first and musicians second. And then occasionally, apparently, he would add, and third, are we cellists? And so kind of prioritizing, well, how do I think about my role in society, and how am I using cello? How am I using music to serve the people around me? That's just kind of the overall mindset that, Play for the Vote is operating in, where this is a time when everybody in the country is concerned and worried and stressed because nobody knows what's going to happen, but everybody likely has an idea of what they want to have happen. And so, that moment of fear, dare I say, use that word, this is where we as artists, have a role, and we can fill a need for society with our music. And, again, the logistics of playing at a polling location require us to not do anything candidate related or political issue related or party related, right? So in order to be present at that location playing music, it has to transcend any one particular viewpoint. Like legally, you have to be able to transcend that. And so thinking that, for me as an artist, like now I'm thinking about, well, what kind of music do I want to share in that environment and in that moment? And I really enjoy that sort of mental space of thinking, okay, it's not actually about me anymore and about what I want to express to the world, but how can I use music as a gathering collective tool that everybody could find access point in. And for cellists, obviously, we've got all sorts of great instrumental music without political connotations, and so Bach would be an obvious go-to in that kind of environment. But any music that people feel like they're passionate about is likely appropriate. And so, for those who are thinking of playing, I think it's a really specific and unique moment to think about how we can use our music. And I think for the people that play at the polling locations, who play for the vote on November 5th, it's definitely, the feedback we're getting, like this is a memorable experience, and that, it's not actually an experience that one can get that often, really only every 4 years at this point.
Could you speak a little bit more about the potential legal issues around play for the vote that you would have to follow to make sure that you're in line with election polling rules?
Of course, and this is all a part of the guidance that we give the people that are signing up at playforthevote.org. But the word is called electioneering, and that's, you may see people with signs and promoting certain candidates and issues near a polling location, but generally it's illegal to be promoting certain issues within 100 feet of a polling location. So if you want to get right up there and play music at the entrance or even inside the building, then you have to steer clear of electioneering. It's against the law to electioneer. And so that just means you can't play music, say anything, or wear anything that would be interpreted as promoting a specific candidate, party, or issue. And so it's actually a very simple, idea, but it's like, basically you don't want to show up with a shirt for a certain candidate, or other things, because then that would be truly illegal. But then apart from but even if you did that, if you moved 101 feet away from the entrance, you should also be fine. And then apart from electioneering, where we want to stay nonpartisan in order to be at the polling location, the general busking rules, busking is not illegal. I think where you would need a permit to busk is when you're asking for money. Also, if you're using amplification, technically would need a permit in most locations. So it's not illegal to simply play music outside if you're not asking for money and if you're not using like an electric amplifier. And so that's another way where, just to keep it simple, a cellist as an acoustic instrument can go play Bach anywhere, and that's not an issue. And so, these are the kinds of things that we can help our musicians understand and plan for when it comes to playing for the vote.
I think it's really inspirational that you're so community focused in these kinds of projects. I was wondering if you had any tips for young musicians who want to dip their toes into building a community project like this. Are there any hardships you had to overcome in order to form this organization?
Well, I mean, there's two kind of levels of engagement. Like in 2020, we started Play for the Vote like at the drop of a hat and just went all in for a whole month right before the election, because it was that soon, it was happening that soon. And I think, we didn't have any funding, we didn't have any guidance, we didn't have any support in that sense. It was just something we did. Like I just kind of started calling my web designer and other people that I was like, I think I would need your help if this was going to happen. And I just got volunteers to say yes. And so I guess the underlying thing that I have learned in life with, organizing things like this is that you don't have to ask for permission. You just have to do it if it's something that excites you. And so that's just a mindset that you can embrace, that if you're willing to put in the organizational work, if you're willing to ask other people for help, then you don't have to wait for somebody to ask you to do something special. You can just make something happen because you want to see it happen. And then, so, I mean, that's kind of the story of Play for the Vote in 2020. In order to form a nonprofit organization and legally be a 501c3 and kind of move into the space that we're at now, more as a more official organization, that also was just not very fun to kind of learn about, how to make the 501c3 organization. But again, it kind of comes down to the same thing, where I was asking people to join my board. And I guess if there's any advice, it would be that at whatever stage you're in the beginning stage or like the organizational stage, that nothing likely good will happen if you're not asking other people for help. And so it's like, that's also a good barometer if you have a good idea or not. If nobody is willing to help you, then maybe the idea isn't that interesting. But for me, at least for Play for the Vote, especially because it started with zero money, and I just had to like spend a lot of money to try the idea. The fact that other people were willing to volunteer and help me was the first like kind of glimmer of validation that maybe this idea is meaningful and that I wasn't going crazy. And so that's a meaningful way, if you're able to ask people for help. Just the feedback you'll get and the interest that you'll see can help you decide if this is really actually worth pursuing and sending a lot of energy to.
Do you have any interesting stories from people who participated in the previous Play for the Vote?
Let me think. Yeah, anecdotally, were there any good stories? I think actually, like I have a lot of friends and colleagues in the sort of the folk world, traditional music from the Celtic world and the bluegrass world, and so a lot of those styles of music are very dance inspired and dance connected. And so I knew of some Irish musicians playing who actually were basically challenging voters to dance with them, to do some like Irish step dancing to the fiddle music that was happening. And so, different styles of music, offer different opportunities for that kind of engagement with voters. I'm trying to think, like when I was seeing all the images come in from 2020, people, every performer is doing like social media posts and tagging us so we can see, where they are and what they're doing. what was really striking is to see people like in Chicago wearing like winter coats and like, fingerless gloves. And then to see somebody in Florida posting with flip-flops and short pants, and kind of like just like the different environments. It was just really remarkable to see all the different ways in which people were finding to share their music. But yeah, I mean, I don't have any good like stories. I think most of the feedback was pretty like good and like in a predictable way, because in 2020 we were actually concerned about violence at the polling locations, and making sure our musicians would be protected. And I think like the sort of no news is good news thing was what we were looking for, which is that there wasn't actually much drama happening with people at the polling location.
Oh, speaking of different genres, I'd like to ask you some questions from in the practice room. Let's see. What do you enjoy most about practicing? What inspires you? Is it all classical, or are there inspirations outside of this genre?
That's a hard question there. I mean, for those who know sort of the music that I play and the environments that I teach in, I perform mostly non-classical music. I do a lot of improvisational music, and I do a lot of original music, a lot of cross-cultural collaboration. So for me, my practicing, like, I still do what feels like really meaningful technical practice, long tones every day, chromatic sixths, chromatic fourths, some octave work. Like, I do a lot of hand shape work that I feel can help me in any style. And so apart from what is maybe a very focused technical check-in that I do with my instrument every day, for me, every practice session is different based on the repertoire I'm learning. So like just today, I was listening to some music. I'm going to be playing a trio concert with a tabla player from India named Sandeep Das, who is a colleague of mine in the Silk Road Ensemble. The two of us are joining a lauto player from Greece named Vasilis Kostas. And Vasilis, so the lauto is kind of like a plucked instrument with double strings that are octave displaced. It's a beautiful instrument. So here I am learning all this contemporary Greek music in different meters. And harmonically, it's not very complex, although some of the scales have microtones. But really, it's like actually the forms are complex, and I'm going to have to improvise in seven. And so I'm just kind of soaking in that repertoire that I'll be performing on November 1st. And so, like, when I'm thinking about that music, where I know because Sandeep, the tabla player, is involved, that it's going to be different every time. There's not necessarily going to be a set arrangement or a set part that I'll play the same way every time. That's a different mindset where I want to kind of practice all of the different possibilities and kind of keep testing myself to see how I can play it differently every time, so that when I'm with the other musicians finally for our first rehearsal, that they can throw things at me that I could respond to and not feel kind of stuck in one way of playing things. So that, that experience in it, like if I contrasted that with if I have like a solo show coming up where I'm going to be playing more of my songs, then I've got complicated cello arrangements that I'm trying to coordinate with my vocals. And in that environment, muscle memory is one of my best friends, so that I can like keep singing and focusing in my singing while playing like, complicated cello parts kind of on muscle memory. So that's for when I do my songs, there's a lot of repetition I do kind of at different tempos. So that's just a way of me avoiding your question and saying that, it really depends on what the upcoming performance is and how I would prepare for it. But I think in general, because I'm active largely in non-classical environments, the shift in my practicing from my classical background really has to do with kind of what I was talking about, which is instead of figuring out the one way I want to play a phrase or a piece of music, the practicing becomes a lot more exploratory, where I actually am purposely trying to avoid decisions ahead of time and practice things in as many different ways as possible, so that I can be more interactive and spontaneous with the other musicians. and not come in with an individual plan that would kind of be vulnerable if things change. Yeah, so that's a different approach maybe than a typical classical focus that I would have, like if I was playing chamber music with people where, you know, we're kind of crafting a specific interpretation. That's kind of a different process.
As a non-traditional classical musician, do you think there are any skills or techniques that you think that a more classically trained cellist or musician should be taught?
The short answer is yes. And the long answer would take a lifetime to fully explore it. And I know I've gotten to do some of this in previous cello chats. I've shared some improvisational scale routines before. And obviously a lot of what I do at my summer camp, mikeblockstringcamp.com, and even where I teach at NEC in the non-classical department here in Boston at New England Conservatory. I think there's just any number of ways to stretch ourselves mentally, creatively, and physically in every style, right? So classical music, Western classical music stretches us in so many ways. And, you know, jazz stretches me in other ways, and bluegrass stretches me in other ways. So there's definitely things that everybody can learn from everybody. I think some of the things I've found particularly meaningful in non-classical styles that still helped me when I played classical music, oddly enough, had to do with like technical things. I found that when I was practicing classical music in a traditional way of really, you know, finalizing my fingerings and trying to, you know, do difficult passages through sheer repetition, you know, slow practice obviously is helpful, but like the sort of like what I was talking about, like the single, like deciding on the way I want a phrase to sound and then trying to play it the same way every time. What I learned is that that's actually harder than playing things differently every time, because and it's not harder in a good way. It's harder in that our body learns better. I think, like my muscles and my brain, I learn better through the more contrasting practice experience. And so, I mean, I can even just maybe demonstrate with the cello. Let's see. Like if I was gonna have like a big shift that I wanted to practice, like in a classical way, then I find myself kind of doing the same way every time. Let me see, is my original sound on? I'll turn it on, so hopefully this will sound good. Yeah, I don't know how people's speakers are where they're at, but this is the Forte 3D cello that I've been performing on this whole year. I can't recommend it highly enough, forte3d.com. But like, let's say I've got like a shift, and I'm just like doing that octave shift. Like for me as a classical cellist, I would maybe practice that, like kind of articulating those positions, right? I would do that slowly. Then I would kind of break it up until finally I'm able to play just that shift, right? So I might spend 20 minutes, you know, working on like an important shift over many days. And then in the performance, I might get nervous and I still might miss it. I don't know if that's an experience that anybody else can relate to. But what I appreciate about like improvisation is it actually, there's no time. If you want to like play something cool while you're improvising, there's no time to think about, well, how am I going to break down that shift? And so actually you have to access your instincts a lot more when you're improvising. And so I find myself kind of like doing crazy, you know, things that are kind of hard sometimes when I'm improvising, in a way that if it was part of a notated piece, it would stress me out a lot, knowing that it was coming. But when you're improvising, what it taught me is actually how much I can trust my instincts and how much I can trust the technical practice I've put in already. And I know I can hit those shifts, and so I don't have to stress out about it. And so finding that experience in improvisation was really meaningful, because I used to, when I was in undergrad, I had the luxury of spending 4 years studying with Richard Aaron. I got to study with Richard Aaron at the Cleveland Institute of Music. And what I appreciated about him so much is this idea of technical improvement being connected to like my growing consciousness and being conscious of how I'm using my body as a way to get better. And that's a mindset I still embrace today. But when I remember when I was a student, the danger point for me was I would start to think too much. And I would go from becoming conscious of what I was playing, and then very soon I found myself, I was just self-conscious. I didn't trust myself. I didn't have confidence that I could hit something because I knew all the ways it could go wrong. So kind of building my consciousness then and then becoming self-conscious was then difficult for me. And so improvisation helped me get out of the self-consciousness and to trust my instincts in a way that even when I play classical music is so incredibly helpful. And so I think even if somebody, a cellist who has like really clear focus that Western classical music is what you're passionate about, and you really want to play that music and only that music, that doesn't mean that improvisation doesn't have a lot to offer. For all the reasons that I just articulated, even on a technical level, improvisation gave me more confidence than I had when I was just playing Western classical music. And then, yeah, like on a kind of an artistic level, when we're playing classical music from different composers, we're often thinking about how we would play Bach different than we would play Tchaikovsky, and how we might play Beethoven different than we play Shostakovich. And that kind of sensitivity to the voice of the composer is a meaningful thing, right? Because different emotions and different parts of us can come out when we're playing the music of different composers. And I find that process to be very similar to the multi-style experience, where I'm trying to understand, well, what makes Irish music different than bluegrass, and what makes jazz different than Arabic music, and what makes Indian music, North Indian music, different than South Indian music, like the subtleties of the expression of different styles, and the process of getting in the mindset of like a whole cultural and style, I find very similar to the process of getting in the mind of a specific composer. And so, and then similarly, the benefits are that when I'm playing jazz, I can be a different kind of musician, and I can bring out different things in myself than I can when I'm playing, traditional Beethoven string quartets. And so I appreciate the opportunity in different styles of music to access different parts of my expression. And then, of course, you can also serve different audiences and connect with different kinds of musicians when you're going through that process. So it doesn't actually feel that different than the classical process of learning repertoire from different countries and centuries. But it is a longer journey to sort of learn new musical languages, especially when so many of the music around the world are not written down. And so you're then spending a lot of time playing and learning by ear. That's also a different experience, but one that I particularly enjoy as well.
Do you have any tips for musicians that want to get a little bit more into composition or improvisation? Because a lot of classical musicians have been taught to follow what's on the page very, very accurately, and kind of breaking away from that might be scary.
It's only scary if allow it to be scary. I think for me, composition and improvisation can be very connected. And if you're, anybody who can play cello can create, your own melody. And so for me, I often am composing pieces through improvisational exploration. And I think approaching composition or improvisation as an exploration is helpful because when we talk about great composers, we think, oh, well, they have something very specific that they're trying to say, and so they have to say it in their own personal way, and that's what makes their music special and unique. And then somebody who even might have an interest in composing might think about themselves and think, well, I don't know what I want to say, so should I be composing if I'm not sure what I want to say? And I think what is often underappreciated is how the compositional process is really a discovery process. You don't really know what you want to say until you've kind of gone through the process. It's kind of like a diary entry. We write in a diary to sort of help us clarify our thoughts, or even people who have like a therapist for counseling, like the process of talking through your thoughts is helpful to crystallize how you actually feel about things. And composition is the same thing for me. And so I don't actually know what a piece is going to be about until I'm starting to write it. And so I just encourage people, to just try making sounds and try to make a melody. You don't actually have to know what it's going to end up feeling like or what it's going to end up sounding like when you start. And so you can kind of figure it out as you go. And improvisation can be a really helpful tool for composition because it's just a lot quicker. I don't actually write my music out until the last possible moment. And even then, only if I need to work with musicians who need to read it. I play with a lot of musicians who don't read music or prefer not to read music. So the idea of composing doesn't even have to include the process of notation if you don't want it to. That notation can simply be an effective way to share it with other musicians quickly so they can learn it quickly. I think like there's no reason to be scared of writing a bad piece because nobody has to hear it. And so just, I think that creative process is kind of like a muscle. Like, the first time you lift weights, you're going to be pretty weak and you won't be able to do it very long. But if you do it every day, even just a little bit, you're going to get a little more toned. And before you realize it, you'll be able to do things that you didn't think you could have, a week ago or 2 weeks ago. So the creative process, it builds incrementally in my experience, where you're not going to have a flash of inspiration where suddenly you write a symphony one day out of nowhere. It's really by like engaging the creative muscle regularly that it just starts to feel like second nature. And so then in that sense, it's nothing to be scared of, just like maybe exercise isn't something to be scared of, even not that I'm a great example for exercising every day. But just this trust that if you do it regularly, it gets easier is something that is true of the creative process.
All right, thank you so much for your insights. I'm going to put a link to play for the vote in the chat. And I was wondering if you had any final thoughts about Play for the Vote that you'd like to share to everyone.
Well, sure. I mean, we've been talking a lot, knowing that this is a cello-specific community here at CelloChat, encouraging people to sign up at playforthevote.org. And you can tell your friends to sign up after you do it, and you can rope people into performing with you as well. But then also we're able to take support, if there's people who this idea resonates with and you're interested in supporting Play for the Vote, you can go to our website, playforthevote.org/donate. And there, you can help support our efforts and help us get the word out to more and more musicians. And because now we're 501c3, it's all tax deductible and can benefit you in that way as well. But I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it with everybody here, and for considering, if you're all considering to perform or support, you can just learn more about it on our website, playforthevote.org.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.